Hey everybody, it's your Peacekeeper coming at you with the start of the Royal Navy Cruiser Line How to Play series. Before we get to talking about the Black Swan, we're going to talk about the Royal Navy Cruisers as a whole. I will start off by saying that if this is your first line of ships, this is your very first game ever played in World of Warships, I highly recommend you choose a different line to start down. There is a number of reasons for that. They have a very specific playstyle, and while we'll talk about that playstyle as we go through the How to Play series, like I did with all the other How to Play series, it's not a playstyle that is really conducive to the first-time player of this game. There's a number of skills that are required to really maximize these ships, and I just think that you'll be very frustrated with them if this is your first line that you go down, or if this is your first cruiser line to go down. I definitely don't recommend this as the first cruiser line to play either. I highly recommend you take a look at the Japanese cruisers. They are far more general purpose, far more easy to pick up the skills on. Once you've gotten all the way through those cruisers, then you can come back to the Royal Navy cruisers and really enjoy them. The reason why I don't think that they are really a good starting line of cruisers is we have that gameplay difference, but they're also extremely fragile, and if you do not angle with these ships, you will just take insane amounts of damage, and even if you do angle with these ships, you will also take insane amounts of damage, depending on if you're up-tiered or not. And that can be very difficult to learn how to play these ships. They also only fire armor-piercing rounds. There is no high explosive for you to start fires with. And as a result, these ships really take advantage of ships that are sailing broadside to them. If you're not used to shooting at those types of ships, because this is your first game and you're not used to playing cruisers, it can be very frustrating. And Wargaming has done some things to make the armor-piercing work a little bit better on angled ships. However, it is not nearly as effective as shooting HE at those ships are, and you don't have that damage over time effect of fire. So we've got the fragility, the fact that they can't take hits. We've got the fact that they have a very unique playstyle, and the fact that they are armor-piercing only. There's also some other things that need to be known about these ships before we go on into talking about the Black Swan. Starting at Tier 3, you get a heal. It's not a big heal, but it is a heal. You do have the ability to repair damage that you've taken. It does help these ships out tremendously with regards to their survivability. Also, starting at Tier 3, you get torpedoes. They are single-fire torpedoes. You can also fire them as a narrow-spread salvo, but the single-fire torpedoes means that you can launch each tube individually. This is an incredibly powerful tool for somebody who is familiar with using torpedoes. If you're not familiar with using torpedoes, you will not truthfully understand the power of the single-launch torpedoes, and it can be very frustrating to try and get hits with them. Also, at Tier 5, you get smoke, but unlike, say, Destroyer Smoke or the Flint Smoke, another cruiser that has smoke, the smoke has a relatively short deployment time of about 7 seconds, which gives you about 2 smoke rings worth of smoke. And if you are deploying that above 20 knots, you will sail outside of the smoke. You can deploy it at 20 knots, and you will just barely stop before you get to the edge of the second smoke ring. So with that, there's a little bit of skill and finesse that's required to play these ships, and I don't think that's a good way to start off. As I said, they do only fire AP. That's across the entire line. The only Royal Navy cruiser currently in the game that fires HE is the Belfast, and it is my understanding that it does not get the armor-piercing shells from the main line as a result of having high explosive shells. The changes that Wargaming made to make that viable were all entirely done by tweaking the auto-bounce angle for them, meaning these shells can impact at relatively shallow angles and still penetrate. The other thing that they tweaked was they have relatively short fuses, and this is as a result of armor piercing up against a destroyer has a tendency to penetrate through and through, and when it's penetrating through and through, you only get overpen damage as opposed to normal damage. The Royal Navy cruisers have shorter fuses so that you can get normal penetrations on destroyers, which allows you to do more damage to them as a trade-off for not having high explosive, which is far more general purpose. These ships are also, I guess the best way to put this is unique in their ability. They don't lose speed while maneuvering. In fact, the Emerald actually gains speed while maneuvering, which is really weird to think about. I don't know how that's physically possible, but it does make these ships very maneuverable. And as a result, you can do some pretty interesting things with them. They also have an absolute insane ability to accelerate. It's almost like they gave you the engine acceleration module for free, which is sweet. Don't get me wrong, I really enjoy that, but they take off from a standstill really quickly. Okie doke. Let's talk about the Black Swan. The Black Swan class of sloops were sloops. They were designed specifically as convoy defense vessels, which is why they have the depth charge rack at the back. In fact, the Black Swan class is responsible for 29 German U-boat sinkings during World War II. The overall design considerations were to have a longer range than a destroyer or frigate, while only trading speed to keep it. You'll notice that these ships do have a pretty healthy complement of firepower. I mean, you've got 6 4-inch guns. They are rapid-firing 4-inch guns, and they do very, very well at shooting at other ships in their tier. The Black Swan, that is. It also had one of the more potent anti-aircraft batteries for small German ships. And this is due in part to the fact that the British put on what is called the fuse keeping clock, which is basically a simplified version of anti-aircraft fire control computer, lacking the radar aspect of it. And it was designed to track aircraft going up to 250 knots and provide accurate time of flight calculations to the shells so that the guy setting the fuse can set the correct fuse time and have these shells explode in the path. So the anti-aircraft capabilities in real life of these ships were pretty capable, and the British actually enjoyed that aspect about them. It means you could pretty much take on anything flying at you, any scout planes that are flying at you from, say, German commerce raiders coming at your convoy. And of course, the depth charges allowed you to, sink the 29 U-boats that they sank during World War II. And that fire control director is right here behind the bridge, and it looks exactly like, well, a fire control, a fire control director. So that's what that is there, in case those of you who are into ship history are familiar with that. There are 2 notable ships that I wish to talk about. One is the HMS Starling, and the other is HMS Black Swan. The HMS Starling, which its whole number was U-66, was the head of the 2nd Support Group, which composed of 6 sloops that were not assigned to convoy escort duty. The HMS Starling participated in the sinking of 14 U-boats as part of her convoy duty or as the member of the 2nd Support Group. This is the highest of any of the sloops, the Black Swan sloops. It's also a very impressive number compared to even destroyer escorts for convoys. The HMS Black Swan, the whole number is L57. It was later changed to... Let me see if I can find it here. U-57 and then F-57. The Black Swan was struck by a German bomb, and it passed completely through the ship and caused some significant damage. It was able to get repaired and returned to service. She served all the way into Korea, But prior to Korea, and still during World War II, her and the HMS Belfast, also in the game, it's a premium, currently in the shop for the North American server. She and the Belfast entered Shanghai as the first Royal Navy warships. They entered Shanghai to liberate a Japanese concentration camp containing British POWs. As I said, the Black Swan also participated in the Korean War, where she was again damaged in the Yangtze incident, where she attempted to assist the HMS Amethyst. 12 of her crew were injured, and the superstructure to the ship was severely damaged by Chinese shore batteries during that incident. In-game, well, this is going to be pretty straightforward and simple. At Tier 1, she is the only ship to fire armor-piercing rounds. Ever since Wargaming removed armor-piercing rounds and made the Tier 1 a restrictive matchmaking, so that they only see Tier 1, this is the only ship that has AP now. She has an extremely high rate of fire, which is really a forecast of what's to come once you get past the Emerald, is my understanding. Relatively maneuverable, but otherwise quite slow. You know, she only has a 19 knot top speed, but she has a 320 meter turning circle and a 2.9 second rudder shift time. That makes angling between salvos. You can do it, although the rate of fire is such that really trying to keep that last turret in engagement is going to require a lot of working of your keyboard. She does have workable armor when angled, but when she's broadside, she will accept citadels from high explosive shells. And she has a very fast turret traverse, which is unusual for Tier 1. Let's talk about the stats. She has 6,450 hit points. That's really not a lot. 6 to 10 millimeters of armor, which again is not a lot. Her main battery is the 3 turrets with 2 guns per turret. They are 4-inch guns. They have a firing range of 8.7 kilometers, and that is without any captain skills that boost the range. The rate of fire on these is every 2.7 seconds with basic firing training. She does have an anti-aircraft battery, although why is beyond me, because Tier 1 cannot see carriers. I guess it's more window dressing than anything. And that is a single pom-pom gun right here. Now, the real Black Swan actually had 2 of them, and the 4-inch gun mounts, you will notice on the Warspite, are part of the anti-aircraft mounts. Right there. And I don't know why they didn't count that for the Black Swan, but, you know, it is what it is. Thanks, Wargaming. And in terms of maneuverability, like I said, 19 knot top speed, 320 meter turning circle, and 2.9 second rudder shift time. Her concealment, and this is one of the stronger suits for the Royal Navy cruisers, they're all very concealable. She has a 6.8 kilometer detection range by sea and 5.4 kilometer detection range by air. Not sure why that last one really matters, but okay. I suppose if you were going to do like a historical battle in the training rooms or something, and you just had to have your Black Swan with your fleet, I guess that would play an important role. Let's go ahead and talk about upgrades. Main Armament Mod 1. That's going to be standard. 20% reduction in the risk of the main battery becoming incapacitated. Plus 50% to main battery survivability, which means you're less likely to lose the main battery. Minus 20% to the main battery repair time, minus 20% to the risk of torpedo tubes becoming incapacitated, plus 50% to torpedo tube survivability, and minus 20% to the repair time of your torpedo tubes. So that's the upgrade that I recommend. The Black Swan, like I said earlier, her real big features are the fact that she is just a machine gun on the sea. She just has a lot of rate of fire, and it's quite fun to just continuously shoot. But enough of me talking about it. Allow me to show you it. Let's load up that battle video. Alright, so these are, as I said earlier, they are restrictive matchmaking with Tier 1 only, so you are only going to see the Tier 1 cruisers as your competitors. And right now, because the Royal Navy cruisers are relatively new, all you're going to really see are just fleet upon fleet upon fleet upon fleet of Black Swans. There are other ships out there at Tier 1, and probably the favorite one of the Black Swan is going to be the Hashidate, which is the Japanese Tier 1. The reason for that is the Hashidate has very, very weak armor, and the AP shells pretty much are, you land them anywhere near the middle of that ship and you're guaranteed to Citadel them, which doesn't do a whole lot of damage, but it does more damage than, you know, just if you were to just have a normal pen or an overpen. So that's kind of a nice feature, a nice ship to aim at. You can Citadel other ships. The Erie is probably your biggest threat in terms of not being able to Citadel or do reliable amounts of damage. The Erie is, of course, hampered by the fact that its rate of fire is extremely low, but its guns hit hard. So the Erie is probably the toughest nut to crack, with the Hermelin and Orlin being thrown in there in the middle. Of those two, I would say... Ooh... You know, I think the Hermelin is probably a little bit tougher nut to crack than the Orlin is. So, anyway, this is, I can't remember what the name of the map is, but this is the other Tier 1 map that isn't islands. And I actually like this map a lot. I wish there was a slightly larger version of it for higher tier gameplay. Maybe not like Tier 10 gameplay, but slightly larger map certainly wouldn't hurt. As you can see, we do have that 8.7 kilometer range, which is over half the map, so it's not a big map at all. Who knows, maybe doing tier 10s on this map would actually be kind of fun, force people to really brawl, and you'd start off in detection range, so there'd be no way to really hide from them. But anyway, this of course being the game mode in which each team has two bases, or has a base. There are two bases on the map, and you have to cap the other's base. It's kind of like capture the flag, but a little bit more difficult than that. These Tier 1 fights often devolve into basically a death match. So we have our first target of the day. That's an Erie. And, of course, right as soon as we start shooting at him, he just disappears. But he'll come back. And as you can see, the gun arcs are relatively flat at this point, and they will become quite annoyingly, like... If you've played U.S. destroyers, you will feel right at home in the Royal Navy cruisers. You can see how much damage we're doing, and you can see that rate of fire, and we're really taking advantage of the rate of fire here to try and do some damage here. Now, as I said earlier, you know, my recommendation is you play these as kind of ambushers, but at Tier 1, there's no way to successfully ambush. The engagement ranges are so low, and everybody pretty much just fires at everything. So there's really not a huge amount of skill required in playing the low tiers. So there's a perfect example. I just did 2 Citadel hits for 1,100 damage to the Black Swan that's over there that's sailing broadside. And that is the downside to these ships. You just cannot sail broadside in them. You have to be paying attention to all of the other ships on the map to try and minimize your profile so that you don't get Citadeled repeatedly. Even with HE, it will happen. There's two Citadels on the Orlin. So 3 Citadels on the Orlin. These ships just make short work of anything that is broadside to you, which at these low tiers, well, you know, that's pretty obvious. And I'm sure a lot of people are wondering, why are you doing a video on the Tier 1s? Well, this is the logical place to start, so that's why we're doing that. And as I said earlier, you know, your real goal should be to focus on whatever ships are broadside to you. Ships that are presenting a nose-on or tail-on profile to you or are heavily angled are not good ships to start to shoot at. Simply because of the fact that they are going to be able to mitigate damage. There's a Citadel, 735 damage, or 32 damage, 732, yeah. But just keep the rate of fire up, pay attention to who you're broadsiding to, and take advantage of ships that are broadside to you. And here you'll start to see, since this is the only ship that's really in range that I can shoot at because of the mountains, you'll start to see how the damage rolls are starting to die off. You'll also see that I'm being a broadsiding scrub because this guy isn't paying any attention to me. And now he's broadsiding to me, and you can watch as the hit points just melt away. Another Citadel. And a kill. Alright, so we've finished off their assault on the west side of the map. Now we need to start heading towards the rest of the ships and engaging what we can. Oh, Erie goes down. Okay, so there's nothing else. One of the habits that I like to get into, and I'd like to encourage others to get into, is when you're in these lulls in engagement, if you're planning on changing the side that your guns are on, go ahead and aim that place, aim in that direction before you start your turn. That way you can get those guns turning before you need them. And that is a good habit just to get into simply because of the fact that you're going to come back around. Simply because of the fact that, your guns then are already there. Okay, so we got the Erie. The Erie has been sunk. We're at 11,917 damage. This is already an above average game for this ship. Just barely, but it is above average. And we've got ourselves a Black Swan. Oh, he's turning away. So we'll go ahead and... Well, he's the only thing really in range at this point in time, so we'll engage him. He's currently engaging our ships that are currently in the cap, so I don't expect him to last too much longer. Of course, with how damaged our ships are, it could be a very quick match for them. These Tier 1 matches are actually a lot of fun. In fact, I used to bring the Erie out back when you had AP, and it was a lot of fun to play, and it was really easy to farm flags with the Tier 1s. Now, with the restrictive matchmaking and the lack of AP, it's not nearly as easy to do that. As you can see, we are completely out of range of everybody else, and this is a problem that is reminiscent of US battleships, in that you can't get too far away from the action because it takes you forever to get back to the action. It does appear that all of their cruisers are now... Well, that Hashidate is moving backwards, but it does appear that all of their cruisers are now heading back towards their cap. Hashidate is moving backwards, so we'll go ahead and we will add to his pain. Moving backwards is not a viable tactic. The easiest way to take advantage of these people is to pay attention to their smokestack. There's 2 citadels, 3 citadels. There's high caliber. We got Confederate and high caliber in this match. All right. If you pay attention to the smokestacks and the direction of the icon, and by direction of the icon I mean direction of the ship. If you pay attention to the direction of the ship, you can see which side is the front, which side is the back. You combine those two, you can tell if the ship is moving forwards or backwards. If the smokestack is standing, or the smoke coming out of the smokestack is going straight up, then it is most definitely a ship that is moving, not moving at all. If it's going to the back of the ship, it's moving forward. If it's going to the front of the ship, it's moving backwards. And here's an engagement with an Orlan. He goes broadside, and this will be pretty short work of him. You can see how much damage they do take, and it's really disconcerting at times how much damage you actually take. And a Citadel to finish him off. We got 4 kills now, 13 Citadels. And that Black Swan will die before we get there. So, anyway, this line, like I said, it starts off being a very rate-of-fire intensive one. The Weymouth is not, but don't be discouraged. 17,000 damage in the game. 4 kills, Confederate and high caliber. Top of the team with 1,014 base XP. And you can see the damage there. But as I was saying, this line starts off with really high rate of fire. It is a fun line to play. It's just a line that requires a lot of finesse in playing. And like I said, I just don't recommend it if this is your first cruiser line. So definitely not worth going down for your first cruiser line. But anyway, I'm your Peacekeeper. Go ahead and like, comment, subscribe. And we will start talking about the other cruisers here on a weekly basis. Every Monday is the goal. So stay tuned for more. And as always, thank you guys for watching.